Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. It is Friday, July 1st. Oh, my God. Give me a minute to come to terms with that. Jesus. July 1st. Oh, God. There's so much I have to do. The Rattle Poetry Prize deadline is in 2 weeks, and I got to get the issues to the printer. I can't believe it's July 1st already. But anyway, this is a critique of the week. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. As always, the point of the critique is to give that workshop experience to everybody who might not have access to it. It's just a great way to share poems and talk about how they're functioning, take them apart, see what works, what doesn't, how everything goes. I'm trying to find my pen. Where is my good pen? There it is. So leave as many comments as you would for the poets today. We have two poets, two excellent ones, Eric Zwieg and who's the other poet? Eric's got kind of a long one. Did I not print the other poet out? I didn't print the other poet out, I don't think. Okay, so let me, maybe I have it on my recovery. Let's see. Yes, there we go. But who was the poet? Let me look it up, the poet, too. Oh, Robert Petrillo. There we go. Sorry, Robert. And this is one of those weeks where I haven't looked at the poems yet, so it's kind of a, as if it were a submission type reading, which is always kind of fun to do, because, let's see, no, clear, there we go. Okay, I have to listen to the printer now, but that's life. Okay, so, yeah, as always, the point of the critique is give that workshop experience, so leave as many comments as you can, let us know what works and what doesn't, how it all goes, and let's see. Okay, so I'm going to have to wait for my printer to heat up now. But let's see. So while I'm waiting for that, let's remind you that the Rattle Poetry Prize deadline is coming up on July 15th. The Rattle Poetry Prize, of course, offers $15,000 for a single poem, and I'm about 2 weeks behind on promoting it. So there are fewer entries than ever, probably. I haven't even checked. But your chances of winning might be higher than they've been in a few years. This is our annual sort of fundraiser and just a cool contest. The entry fee is a subscription, which is always fun. You get 4 issues of Rattle and 4 chapbooks, all for the entry fee of $25, and then a chance to win that $15,000 prize, along with $5,000 runner-up that's decided by the Reader's Choice Award, and along with 5 or 10 finalists for $500 each. And here comes the paper out of the printer. Okay, hang on 1 second. I got to turn the printer off so it doesn't make noise all the time. All right, that's much better. So now we have the poems. Apparently I didn't print them out last night before I went to bed. But let's start out with Eric Zwieg. And like I said, I haven't read these yet, so this is going to be like a submission experience, which is always fun. You know, people always wonder what it's like reading submissions. Well, here you go. You open up your submittable, you click it on, and here is the poem, Ferris Wheel. This is Eric Zwieg. Ferris Wheel. Our fleeting worlds collided. You and I, blindly paired, arranged, set in motion by a mutual friend. A hidden agenda matched us that night to ease the anxiety of the hand-picked underage beauty he coveted, predicted by our accompaniment and participation while the braggart drove and his Lolita rode shotgun. Cruising daylight failing like a memory as country roads fell behind the directful vehicle. The 4 of us, hopeful, hard-earned, broken paychecks in pocket, our former presence illuminated only by the taillight's glow. Up front, the action was visceral, grasping, emoting banal, guttural demands and dictums. Her cotton candy hair teased whorishly high, and Wild Bill's expectations even higher. You and I sat in the back seat, our expressions muted, embarrassed in our newness as 1970s radio hits played and physical boundaries were intimated. Your name introduced, devolving before me. Margaret, Marguerite, Daisy, Maggie, Meg, Peggy, Peg. Cool night air circled, rushing inward through an open window, settling upon the confines of conversation. Questions asked and answers partly revealed. Steadily we bore down on the night's destination with charitable innocence. The final curve of the drive gave way to rows and rows of relinquished vehicles parked in grassy fields. We exited, then made our way along with the moving crowd. Ahead, the taunting fairgrounds, lights beckoned with glee. Decidedly, Dutch treat was agreed upon. The turnstile thriftily turned 1, 2, 3, 4 individual admissions, our senses instantly overwhelmed with the sugary sweet sounds of the midway. By design, Bill and I headed in opposite directions, confidently, divide et impera. Peggy was amused with our boyish behavior, grabbing my hand, leading me with her sense of adventure and intentions. Her charge was infectious as we ate and rode our way with carnivalesque delight towards the grand dame of entertainment towering ahead. An attraction of statuesque proportions, the monstrous circular stood over 200 feet tall, seats teetering in the night sky, garnished with glowing, dangling gams, drawing and enticing the spirited crowd down the midway, co-joined, spiritually united, its angular momentum intoxicating, geometric glass bulbs twinkling. A pleasure wheel, allowing sui generis sightlines for children, with parents, rowdy teenagers, lovers, and occasional poetic solo traveler, misdirected couples. A manufactured perspective rarely seen churning in the night sky. A spinning world of provisional excitement to be shared. Briefly, our eyes promisingly met. As if in secret, I handed the barker enough tickets for 2 riders. My treat, I whispered. You accepted, never questioning my intentions. Nervously, we boarded, and I pledged not to let go when we reached the apex of the ride's flight. The sky's the limit, conceivably. Abreast and climbing, the churning mass of steel spokes, cross members, guide wires, sockets, and lights revolved. A 19th century engineering feat spinning on supporting towers, temporarily ridding the world of conflict. Our passion buoyant, magnetic as heat lightning, and powerful enough to create a moment you will never forget. Well, that's Ferris wheel. And so I find it's strange. This one's strange. I find the beginning very unsettling with the Lolita, like disturbing with the Lolita, the hidden agenda and all this stuff. And the whorish, whatever that was, the whorishly, hair teased whorishly high. We're talking about someone underaged. And then it never, so I don't know. I mean, there's some things that we just wouldn't publish poems about, first of all. And that's a topic where we wouldn't, unless it's to, there's some kind of purpose for it. And here it doesn't really go in a direction where it's addressed later. It's kind of strange. So I'm a little, like that whole concept of, the underage girl coming up on this Ferris wheel. It doesn't get picked up again, right? I mean, Peggy's just amused by the boyish behavior. I don't know. I think maybe like this. I mean, my treat, I whispered, and then there's a couple things like a breast. The word usage there. A few things keep that creepiness, but it's never really addressed. Our passion, buoyant, magnetic. I don't know. So it's a strange poem. But let's look in line by line, I guess, and let's see what other people are saying about that too. Tom Barlow says, I was surprised by the way it ended. Let's see. So Jess LaFell says, I think Lolita is Wild Bill's date. I think we might need more, context in the title. It might be one of those things. And this poem also falls into the issue where you is introduced, but we don't really know who you is, and it's never explained. So who is the you? Is that the Wild Bill character? But who's the you? You and I sat in the back seat. Are we along for the ride? Is he talking to us? Is he creating a picture where we're Yeah, so Jenny Milton says, this is my impression too, just the overall of as the opening lines are, this is Jenny Milton, I agree the opening lines about the underage girl are disturbing, but there's no exploration of the topic beyond the opening stanzas. So yeah, that's the issue for me. So that, if you're gonna pick up this topic, like it's one of those things you have to tread very carefully and work at it. Of course, we have there's some great poems that are extremely disturbing. What is the really famous one? Oh man, why do I draw a blank so much? I don't know. My brain does not conjure things up. You know what I meant? Herbert White. The who wrote Herbert White? What's that guy's name? He's like one of the most famous poets ever, and I can't even remember. Frank Bedart, of course, yeah. So Herbert White by Frank Bedart. If you want to read an extremely disturbing poem, that's like the king of disturbing poems, probably. And and there's a use for it, but it's a very, very difficult thing to tread on. And this feels like it treads lightly over it, I guess is my point. Like it's like, oh, here. So, and toward the end, it's like they're boys too. It doesn't seem as menacing toward the end. So I wonder if this is like a false lead, and maybe this just should be toned down and taking that element out so we can just, I don't know what to make of it really. But as I was saying, the U is a problem too. So we get Ferris wheel, which is this is one of those super simple poems that just describes something in it, so it doesn't give us much to go on. We know that we're going to be at some kind of amusement park or something with a Ferris wheel or a carnival. But other than that, we don't get anything. So there's no clues in the title. And then our fleeting worlds collided. Who is the R? Like who? Like we're not being taken along with this. You and I. Who's you? Who are we? Blindly paired. So this must be the other. So I think the Lolita is Wild Bill's date and then someone else. So we are the person who is on a date with him, or the speaker, I guess. A hidden agenda matched that night to ease the anxiety of the handpicked underage beauty he coveted, predicted by our accompaniment and participation, while the braggart drove in his Lolita Road shotgun. Cruising, daylight failing like a memory, as country roads fell behind the directful vehicle. There's something, too, that people have pointed out already, and that was... Yeah, so Nate Jacobs says a lot of words, even for me, to get to the point. Show don't tell would make the story flow better. The story not that the story was particularly engaging, but that may be a product of the wordiness. And here's an example of what Nate Jacob is talking about. Where were we? Cruising, daylight failing like a memory, that's fine. As country roads fell behind the directful vehicle, like why do we need... what does the directful vehicle add? And there are just a lot of things like that where there's words in there that don't really add, don't give us anything extra. So, I mean, one thing to think of is every syllable, every sound that we have to utter as we're reading a poem should add to the meaning and give us more. And so there's a lot of things like that really don't. The Four of Us Hopeful, we've already talked about hopefulness, hard-earned, broken paychecks in pocket. So it's hard-earned, broken paychecks. The former presence illuminated by only the taillight's glow. So it's like our former presence. Like, look at all these words, and you could condense it down into one line. It could be half the length and say the same thing. So it's kind of cluttery. Up front, action was visceral, grasping, emoting banal guttural demands and dictums. Her cotton candy hair teased whorishly high, and Wild Bill's expectations even higher. See, this stanza a little more, a little tighter than like this stanza, for example. So maybe this is more of a guide. If I'm right, because a lot of stuff happens in the four lines there, and you can feel like even the engagement increase as like the density of what's going on increases. You and I sat in the back seat, our expressions muted, embarrassed in our newness, as 1970s radio hits played and physical boundaries were intimated. So you could say, you and I sat in the back seat, embarrassed in our newness, underneath the 90s radio hits. And our physical boundaries were intimated, just doesn't have a lot. So that's kind of the cluttery stuff. Your name introduced devolving before me, Margaret, Margarita, Daisy, Maggie, Meg, Peggy, Peg. I like that's an interesting detail. I like that detail. Cool night air circled. So I don't know. I mean, do we really need to know what's cool? Like a lot of the descriptors that don't add a whole lot. Rushing toward inward through an open window, settling upon the confines of conversation. Questions asked and answered, partly revealed. Steadily, we bore down on the night's destination with charitable innocence. And so, I mean, it's not that the stuff isn't interesting as we move through. It's just kind of repetitive and wordy. So we could, I mean, this stanza is repeating what we already know. And so it all feels like clutter. Like the poem could be half the length. Decidedly Dutch treat. Oh, wait, no. The final curve of the drive gave way to rows and rows of relinquished vehicles parked in grassy fields. So the final curve of the drive gave way. Why couldn't we just jump into the description of the rows and rows of relinquished vehicles parked in grassy fields? Or even just in grassy fields? So just condense. Just for the sake of keeping us engaged and stimulated. We exited, I don't know why I keep saying excited, then made our way along with a moving crowd. Ahead, the taunting fairground lights beckoned with glee. It's these kind of things that we're talking about with the clutter. Like, we don't need the with glee. Like, you can kind of let the story tell itself through images. The taunting fairground lights is a nice image, and it does a lot. Decidedly, Dutch treat was agreed upon. What's Dutch treat? I don't remember that. I know that's an idiom. Going Dutch? What does that mean? It means everybody pays for themselves? Yeah, each person pays for themselves. Okay. Yeah. So decidedly Dutch treat was agreed upon. The turnstile thriftily turned. 1, 2, 3, 4 individual admissions. Our senses instantly overwhelmed with the sugary sweet sounds of the midway. By design, Bill and I headed in opposite directions. See, here is like the creepiness, the by design. Like, you're wondering because of this stuff up here, like what's going to happen. And occasionally that pops up a little bit just by a few words. But we don't know. We don't get the story. And I don't know. Bill and I are headed in opposite directions, confidently divide et impera. What is et impera? At least I'm learning some words today. Et impera. That means divide and conquer, basically. Okay. Oh, it's divide et impera, not divide et impera. Okay. Peggy was amused with our boyish behavior, grabbed by hand. So occasionally we get the sense that they're not too far apart in age, and maybe it's not as creepy as we think, which maybe that's part of the point of it. I don't know. Peggy was amused with our boyish behavior, grabbing my hand, leading me with her sense of adventure and intentions. Her charge was infectious as we ate and rode our way with carnivalesque delight toward the grand dame of entertainment towering ahead. An attraction of statuesque proportions. So if something is towering ahead, we don't need to say that it's an attraction of statuesque proportions. I mean, it's just kind of the same thing repeated. I'm just trying to go through some of the clutter stuff because that is an issue in this poem. Just getting to the point more quickly. The monstrous circular structure stood over 200 feet tall. So again, we repeated it for the third time. I think this time is fine. But when you add in this one, that's just a lot of saying it's big. Seats teetering in the sky, garnished with glowing, dangling gams. I think that's a good image. I like that. You really see that towering above with legs hanging down and enticing the spirited crowd down the midway, co-joined, spiritually united. This is an interesting idea, and I wonder if, how it's spiritual in that. Something maybe could be expanded on a little bit. Its angular momentum intoxicating, geometric glass bulbs twinkling. So it's a good description, I think. Good images in this section. Because it's an important thing. I mean, the poem's called the Ferris wheel. And so getting a good description of that is probably the highlight of the poem. A pleasure wheel allowing sui generis. So another one I don't know. Sui generis? I am learning a lot. Sui generis. Where was it? Generis. That means unique. The sui generis. The sui generis. Sui? I don't even know. I don't know how to. I don't know how to read pronunciation guides. The sui generis nature of animals. Okay. Does that even make sense in context? Origin. Let's see. Of its own kind is a Latin expression that translates to of its own kind, allowing of its own kind sightlines for. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that actually. I'm not sure what that means. So that's kind of the inkhorn usage right there, maybe, because I don't know what that even adds. Like why I think this should be a colon. Children with parents, rowdy teenagers, lovers, the occasional poetic traveler. I think you need, with a list like this, children with parents, rowdy teenagers, lovers, the occasional poetic solo traveler, misdirected couples, the period feels a little off here too. So one of the things, you want to play with a variety of lists, the list lengths, and it does a good job at first. Then it kind of falls off with married couples. You can hear in the language that it wants to be more. So you want children with parents, rowdy teenagers, lovers, occasional poetic solo traveler, misdirected couples who blah 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 blah. Then describe the misdirected couples a little bit and then move on. I think that there's a missing bit that just feels like it wants to be added there. A manufactured perspective rarely seen churning in the night sky. A spinning world of provisional excitement to be shared. Briefly, our eyes promisingly met. As if in secret, I handed the Barker. So here, the menacingness earlier has kind of gone away, which is the confusing part of the poem. As if in secret, I handed the Barker enough tickets for 2 riders. My treat, I whispered. You accepted, never questioning my intentions, and then it's back for this part. Nervously, we boarded. I pledged not to let go when we reached the apex of the ride's captured flight. The sky's the limit, conceivably. I don't know what that means, conceivably. Abreast and climbing, the churning mass of steel spokes, cross members, guide wires, sockets, and lights revolved. Again, I think the descriptions of the Ferris wheel are the best part of the poem. I think good descriptions of it. A 19th century engineering feat spinning on support towers, temporarily ridding the world of conflict. Our passion buoyant, magnetic as heat lightning, and powerful enough to create a moment you will never forget. And again, maybe there's a little bit of, menace there. I mean, I think it's just too subtle, maybe. And there's no sense of remorse, but there's no sense of, it's like again, I think I was talking about Uncanny Valley, I think last week, talking about, what were we talking about? I think the rule of 3 has something to do with that. But this here is sort of in an uncanny valley as well, because we don't know what to make of them. It's not extreme enough as like a poem like Herbert White, where we're supposed to, we know the experience of the poem is meant to make us feel how creepy and gross that character is, and actually understand what some people are like. It's the exploration of that gross mind. And it doesn't go that far in that direction for this, and then it also doesn't go into a self-aware direction either. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some interesting, there is a poem, a kind of innocent Herbert White, not innocent, but like isn't aware of the cruelty involved in what's going on. Unself-aware type Herbert White, where you could write in that voice, and I have never seen a poem that does that, and maybe that's what this is trying to do, like not realizing how disturbing their behavior is a character, and not, and thinking that they're not creepy. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. So maybe it just kind of hasn't found its way. Maybe. And I'm not sure what else to say about this poem, so maybe we should move on. Let me see what other comments are saying. Joe Barker says a short story or a poem. Karen Marker says, where to go? I agree with feeling disturbed by some of the content, and it seemed to go off into many different narratives that were hard to follow. The differences, this is Susan Talley, the differences, the main narrator point of view included the group, but she is different. The other he does not want to really relate to her. Jenny Menton says, I think the you is a narrator's date. Joe Barker says, where's the turn? Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what's missing. Like, you're waiting for the turn to come, for some kind of like, why are you telling me the story? That kind of question. You're like waiting for the moral of the story. I mean, basically. Jean-Dre Van Breda says, I think this could work better as a short story. And someone else said, is this a poem or a short story? Let's see. Nate Jacob says, set the scene and then let it go in the name of narrative. I want to relate to the people to know the story. I don't need all the continuing scene setting. It kills the story. Again, Nate, it's just too much scene. Tell me the action with fewer adverbs. I want the story to relate to, and I want it as quickly as can be done with the best and fewest words needed. So Susan Taylor says, you can relate to the front seat or tune it out. They are in the back seat more important than the front seat. He is beginning a new evening. He remains to be an event or just an adventure after a work week. I mean, if there's like, some, this stuff's going to going on the front, but we're trying to have a regular date in the back. If that's the point, it doesn't really explain it. And there's this part where they, by design, we split them off to divide and conquer. And I just don't know how to take that. Like, I don't know. Let's see. I think a big part, this is Jess LaFels. I think a big part of the point of the story is the Ferris wheel. The idea is to relate to the thing, the noun, Ferris wheel. That's interesting. J. Milton says, I think the narrator's presentation of relationships is also a bit old-fashioned, with the male characters trying to design a plan to get the female dates alone. The female characters presumably want to be on the date too. Yeah, and they hint, that comes up toward in this section here, like the you, which is the narrator's date, is happy to be there too. Let's see. Okay, well, let's move on. I don't know. We're going to have to really fast. I don't know if there's time for this second poem, because this is long. Let me see how many pages it actually is, because this actually feels like a short story. Maybe we'll just, I don't know, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, I'll read some of it and see how it goes. We try to be quick about it, though, because the first poem was kind of long, too. So this is Molly Kelly Crawford. Slow decline was in full swing, fear of an afterthought, catatonia reaching new limits, risk-taking, long escaped, nothingness surrounding, hope, a misconceived action plan, faulty, broken, damaged, a piling life of losses and empty, sour, unfulfilled dreams, leaving but tasteless gluttony. My existence dreamless, hollow, a unique, uninterrupted stupor. The nightly crowd swelled, cheap drinks, cheap food, cheap ideas, the essence and nexus of cut-rate survival restaurateurship. This place, walking distance from home, satisfying in its simplicity, repeating repetitive, repetition. Never ending, never evolving, a measuring stick, illy conceived, the staff knew me well. In attendance were all the usual performers to my right, a wrestling match playing out for a woman's attention, their Latin flair, persistence admirable. To the left, a group of personal trainers talking shop, liberally and effortlessly absorbing all alcohol. I sat listening to music, watching baseball, dismissing any thoughts of inclusion or conversation. So that's how this starts, and it goes on. I think there's 3.5 pages. So what I want to say about this is I think this is more of a short story. Like, I think the Ferris wheel, some people are mentioning that maybe is more of a short story. I think that works as a narrative poem. I mean, if you look at someone like a poet like B.H. Fairchild, who's great at writing narrative poems. I think he's wrote one of the best baseball poems, which is It's about a center. Is it called center field? Let me look that up really quick. It's called Body and Soul. Yeah. And so it goes on through. Let me just show you this really quick. This is from Verse Daily. But Body and Soul goes through like this. Here. Again, this is B.H. Fairchild. I'm half numb, guzzling bourbon and coke from coffee mugs. Our fathers fall in love with their own stories, nuzzling the facts but mauling the truth. And my friend's father begins to lay out with the slow ease of a blues ballad a story about sandlot baseball in Commerce, Oklahoma, decades ago. And it goes on to tell this story. It's just a wonderful story. It's pretty long, but so check out this poem, read it the whole way through. But it's a wonderful storytelling through narrative, and you can write a long story with a lot of rich details as a poem. There's great tradition of that. That's originally what poetry was, the epics, and so I think that really works. And I think the first poem was a poem. But you have to still. I think the difference between poetry, and this poem is it's broken into sort of stanzas of 4 lines each almost, or yeah, they're mostly 4. Some are 5, and it feels more like prose just in the writing, but that's really not what it is. I always think of the distinction between poetry and prose as where the poem exists. I think there's like a continuum, and it's sort of your head to your body. And a poem is more bodily, and a story is more in your head, in your mind's eye, creating a world, creating a movie in your head, where the action is taking place. And if the poem lives more on your breath, or if the writing lives more on your breath, then it's a poem. And just reading here, this felt very short story-ish, and it's set up like a short story. So I'd say this is probably a short story. But that's how it's always strange. We've published some things that are paragraphs that are several pages long, and they can still work as poems if they're existing on that space where it's sort of like the music of speech coming out, and there's different ways you can shape that on the page to create the effect you want as you're playing on the breath of the reader. But here it feels like I'm conjuring a scene in my head is the primary aspect of this poem, even though both go on all the time for both poetry and prose. They both happen at the same time, but prose, what it does is de-emphasize the sound of the words, and poetry heightens the sound of the words, and that's why you break lines for poems and you don't for prose. You want to think about the sounds a lot more with poetry, and that's really the difference. And here, it's creating a scene. Like, we're getting this nightly crowd swell, cheap drinks, cheap food, cheap ideas. I think it works as a poem, or a story. I don't know where it's going, but it's a good setup for a story. So, but I would call this a short story about Molly Kelly Crawford, I think. Okay, let's move on to the next poet. Let me see if anybody has any other comments first, I guess I should say. Yeah. Okay. So Nancy Huguet says, entry to a poem is captive by the image. Entry to prose equals captive by the question. I mean, to me, I don't know. It's just the bodily nature, because poetry is meant to be heard or spoken, or there's that subvocalization that happens where you read out loud in your head, which we couldn't always do. We used to have to read out loud, supposedly, and and it's the whole motion. Like, if you watch a poet read a poem, they're like tapping their foot and kind of moving, like they really kind of can't sit still, and it's because it's almost like a dance. It's a dance with language. And prose has those elements of music to them. But you don't want, you want someone to be able to read a book on a bus. You don't want them to be like having to move around. It's kind of like that, and the iambic pentameter is like the heartbeat, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And it all has this sort of bodily quality. And I think you can feel it versus having a more image in your mind's eye. Joe Barker says, I think poetry is making words dance on the stage of your mind. I like that. Yeah. So, anyway, okay, let's move on. So these are much shorter poems, so we'll definitely be able to do both. Well, this is much shorter. Oh yeah, I got the other one. Yeah, these are much shorter. So this is Robert Petrillo, Reversal. We'll never share another kiss nor bed. I'll someday lose the memory of your touch. No tender words or footsteps on the tread. When darkness falls, no whispered fears to hush. As August sunlight fades from your eyes, the squalling gulls and lapping waves still played in contrapuntal strains with joyful cries of laughing children basking at midday. We had so much, our lives were doubly blessed with all the hopes we planned, the life we dreamed. Each morning brought new joy into our nest as over us and on your hair sun streamed. Then from the slumber sweet we drift awake, and one more kiss in bed our lips would take. This is Reversal. And sonnet, I assume, I think it felt like 14 lines. With a couplet at the end, which kind of is this? Yeah, bed tread, touch hush, eyes cry. So it's a Shakespearean sonnet. The turn right there where the volta, is it the volta it's supposed to be? Yeah, so a traditional Shakespearean sonnet. Reversal. We'll never share another kiss nor bed. I'll someday lose the memory of your touch. Yeah, Jacob, this clever return to the opening line at the very end. Yeah. We'll never share another kiss nor bed. I'll someday lose the memory of your touch. No tender words or footsteps on the tread. See, I love the music of this. It just feels great to read poems that are written with a meter right, in form. You know, it's just fun to read out loud. When darkness falls, no whispered fears to hush. As August sunlight. So it does get to the sort of romantic. We were talking about this a little bit with Katie Bickham on the Rattlecast this week, but it gets into that sort of romantic era abstraction where I would feel much more engaged if I got some more concrete sense of what's going on rather than the broad generalizations, the kind of vagueness of that era. And I mean, that's why I love Kim Adenizio's sonnets when she writes in form, because she is so concrete and rich while also having form. And I think it's a great combination. You could still, just because you're writing in form doesn't mean you can't use, the advancements as far as imagery and, and concreteness and narrative that we've, that's made poems, I think, more engaging. But the sounds are great. No tender words or footsteps on the tread. When darkness falls, no whispered fears to hush. As August sunlight faded from your eyes, the squalling gulls and lapping waves still played in contrapuntal strains. What are contrapuntal? Let me learn my fifth word for today. Contrapuntal. I've heard of that before, but I don't know. It's from music. It's just of or in counterpoint. Okay. So contrapuntal. So it pretty much just means counterpoint. Strains with joyful cries of laughing children basking at midday. See, I'd love to just see a little bit more of where we actually are and who, see more of the scene. Like we're at midday, but like where are we? I'd like it to be a little more grounded than the in specificity. We had so much. Our lives were doubly blessed with all the hopes we planned, the life we dreamed. Each morning brought new joy into our nest as over us and on your hair sun streamed. Then from that slumber sweet we drift awake, and one more kiss in bed our lips would take. Yeah, and I do like the way that this reverses. It's a good way to put it too, Nate. That then from slumber sweet we drift awake, and one more kiss in bed our lips would take. Yeah, it's a very nice couplet at the end. Yeah. Let me see what people are saying. Yeah, and that's the thing. So Joe Barker says, "Nice sounds, but I'm not drawn in." And it's the distance that isn't as engaging. Although I love the sounds. And yeah, here Nate Jacobs says, "I feel the loss only barely. I want to be punched by the loss, but I do like the theme and the scene." Yeah, I know. It just feels a little flat, and I think it's just the abstraction. Let's see. So Richard Westheimer says the rhythm is in training. Clayton Clark says, "Love it. Drift awake, but feels like the poem is floating." Yeah, that's the thing. I'm trying to think of like a way to how would you make it more gripping? And I guess it just comes down to the thing we talk about all the time, where if we don't really know the story or the circumstances, it's really hard to feel. It's just the emotion lives in specificity, and so having the generalized air about it just isn't as engaging as it could be. So well, I mean, I love sonnets. I love the sound. I love formal poetry. But it does. It's a good way to put it. It feels like it's floating. So how do you get it more detailed? And I want to hear the story. Like, we'll never share another kiss nor bed. I'll someday lose the memory of your touch. Instead of no tender words or footsteps on the tread, like move there into, some specific thing about our relationship or who we are, or, like place us in the actual moment. The tender words and footsteps are just they're so abstract and distant from what like a real people living together experience. When darkness falls, no whispered fears to hush. Is August, at least August is a specific month. Sunlight fade from your eyes. The squalling gulls and lapping waves still played. So that's what the thing I wonder. Like we get these gulls and waves, and we get the children laughing, but we don't really get a sense of where we are. Dick Westover says actual tender words rather than saying. That's probably the best way to put it. I should have said it like this: is that it's like describing what's happening rather than showing us what's happening. I guess it's just show don't tell, but this is like literally show don't tell. Like this is saying, so that we have tender words, but we don't know what the words are. So perfect way to put it, Dick. Yeah. Yeah, show us those whispered fears in line 4, says Katie Dozier. And exactly. We get this description of what is what's happening. It's like it's just one level removed from the actual immediate what's going on. And if we got to hear what the fears were, we just feel more engaged with the poem. And just a few little things. I mean, you can do that with having a title more specifically than reversal to get us a little sense of the scene, like where this is going on, and then tell us a bit about what the fears actually are. The squalls and gulls lapping waves still played in contrapuntal strains with joyful cries of laughing children basking at midday. So all this to tell us that we slept in. We had so much our lives were doubly blessed with all the hopes we planned, the life we dreamed. Each morning brought new joy into our nest. Let me get rid of that person. Report. Remove. I don't know. I don't think I can remove these comments fast enough. We had so much. Our lives were doubly blessed with all the hopes we planned, the life we dreamed. Each morning brought new joy into our nest as over us and on your hair sun streamed. I like that image. There's a nice way that the rhyme sort of catches up with the rhyme in a way that's a little surprising. I think that was my favorite line of the poem. I like that line a lot. Then from that slumber sweet we'd drift awake, and one more kiss in bed our lips would take. Yeah, I just want more specificity. It'd just be more engaging that way. But I love the rhythm and the sound. I think there's great use of the form here. It's really fun to read out loud. Let me keep deleting these. We're getting spammed over on YouTube. There we go. Okay. So let's look at the other poem. Father's Day Gift. Father's Day Gift. Again, this is Robert Petrillo. You were 10 that day at the beach, a perfect summer memory of sun, surf spray cool in the afternoon, playful, rippling waves on sand, seaweed clumps on stringy strands, which we lofted, hurled, flung, red and green, salty, slapping slime wads. We stalked and chased, circling and dodging, epic standoff, gunslinger duet, breathless, laughing, shouting, teasing. We danced a silly childlike jig before collapsing, finally tumbling into gritty towels spread upon the white altar beneath an arching vault of bluest blue, exhausted by exertion from passing back and forth so carelessly, so intently, the sheer weight of our love. It's a very nice poem. And see, this is an example of if some of the details that came up in this poem were in the other poem, I think we would all find it more engaging, I think. So we have, because we know, you were 10, this is Father's Day Gift, you were 10, so we get everything right away, what's going on. The day at the beach, we know everything about the situation right at the beginning. A perfect summer memory of sun, surf spray cool in the afternoon, playful rippling waves on sand, seaweed clumps, long, stringy. So we get these details that we get to feel, which is what's missing from the other poem. I just want to point that out. And this is one of those poems that would be very, it's written like almost for someone, and it'd be very useful to actually give to that person. It's one of those type poems. Let's see. Jean-Andre Van Breda says that the alliteration works great here. Lots of S sounds. Nate Jacobs' second poem works much better. Lovely ending. About the last poem, I guess I missed some comments. Some people were saying it was, we're wondering if she died. So Laura Gregory says, I can't figure out if someone died or if the relationship just ended. And I think that's the problem, too. And Nate Jacobs says definitely death, but it needs a lot more treatment for sure. I wasn't sure about that either with that last poem. And that's what I mean by we're just missing kind of the story. Okay, so out of this poem, back to this poem though. You were 10, that day at the beach, a perfect summer memory of sun, surf spray cool in the afternoon, playful rippling waves on sand, seaweed clumps on stringy strands. It had nice sounds, the stringy strands. This is a poet who clearly loves the sound, and we get to enjoy the sound too as the poems are written. So both these poems sound great. Which we lofted, hurled, flung, red and green, salty, slapping slime wads. I think the slime wads is kind of a, I don't know. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the poem. It's a little too it's too silly and whimsical for the other language, even though it fits with the content of what's going on. We stalked and chased, circling, dodging, epic standoff, gunslinger duet, breathless, laughing, shouting, teasing. These the use of the ing over and over again sort of weakens verbs in a way, like having a list of what's going on. I think this is the weaker line in the poem, and maybe that should be improved. We dance a silly childlike jig before collapsing, finally tumbling into gritty towels spread upon a white altar beneath an arching vault of bluest blue, exhausted by exertion from passing back and forth so carelessly. Yeah, Nate Jacob about slime jobs. Nate Jacob says feels like an inside joke of a reference, too personal. It's one of those things where there's only one, and that's what it is. It feels like it's something that was made up at the time, and since there's only one, it stands out. I think instead of taking it out, it's interesting. It's a nice detail, but maybe try to find something else that works in the same way, so it wouldn't feel like the only thing. It wouldn't feel a little out of place. Yeah. Let's see. We danced a silly childlike jig before collapsing, finally tumbling into greedy towels spread upon a white altar beneath the arching vault of bluest blue. And yeah, Laura Gregory says, love the use of altar. Yeah, and it's like the, we really get the story in specific detail here, and it's very engaging. We danced a silly childlike jig before collapsing. You can really see that play out. Exhausted by exertion, from pacing back and forth so carelessly, so intently, the sheer weight of our love. And a very touching ending. So like I said, this is the kind of poem that, would be as a gift to somebody. Joe Bear says, I like white altar. What is it? I was just thinking the white sand. That's how I interpreted that. And Jenny Milton says, I like the vividness of the second poem. Yeah, exactly. That's what's working here. Joe Barker likes the gunslinger duet. I like that too. That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. Nate Jacob says, lots of nice sounds. The listed images make the scene move instead of getting stuck in it. Nate Jacob says, the intimacy I read into the last stanza feels more like a honeymoon than a Father's Day moment. There is that exhausted by exertion, because it's sort of a cliche for like a romantic kind of love, being exhausted by exertion and then passing out. It does feel a little off. Let's see. Jean-Marie Van Breda says the gunslinger duet feels out of place, though. See, I think that's the thing. I think maybe how it could be improved is this section. I think, we danced, then collapsed, tumbling onto the altar, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that shows it very clearly. I think the fighting and hurling slime wads at each other, I think that could be told a little more clearly and a little more in a way that makes a scene play out. Stalking and chasing. It's this, it's the same thing. The laughing, shouting, teasing, the circling and dodging. I think it could be shown a little bit better. Yeah, Duke Westenheimer points out that this exhausted by exertion. So this is a part I would want to fix. I like the, I like where it goes at the very end. I like these last two lines. But the Dick Westheimer says exhausted by exertion is both abstract and unmusical. And I think you could go from here straight to the end, and it might be improved a little bit. Katie Dozier thought it meant water guns. Maybe they were. I mean, that might be why they're gunslingers. I'm thinking. I'm still harkening back to this. These slime wads being flung and hurled. Which is maybe why it's out of place. But maybe if it was a transition into like playing with squirt guns, then maybe that should be explained a little bit so we know that there's a transition there. And then the gunslinger would fit. That's why I think Jean-Dre said that the gunslinger duet felt a little bit off or didn't really fit. And and I felt that a little bit too, because I was thinking of the, throwing, almost, it's more like a snowball fight, but with seaweed. That's what I was imagining, these seaweed clumps. And I thought that's what was being stalked and chased. And it didn't really make sense, because, shooting a gun and throwing a ball is much different motions. And so it felt a little off because of that. But maybe it's a transition and we do mean water guns. Let's see. And Robert's here. He says, has anyone ever picked up a wad of seaweed from the surf? And Nate Jacobs says, no way, that's gross. Interesting. Sharon Frentis' Gunslinger Duet would be a great title. That would. I mean, but the title almost tells the story of the poem. So I don't know if I'd want to change the title. If you had to jump in the poem without knowing where you were. I mean, you were 10 and that day at the beach. I don't know. Okay. So Nate Jacobs says, so many of the images feel like those inside jokes, moments meant to be retold among those who were there. There is that sense, and I wrote a really short essay once about public versus private poetry, I called it. Whereas, there's a difference between writing for somebody, and I think it's a distinction we don't make enough within poetry, just in the poetry community in general. Because I think there are uses for poetry beyond publishing poems in magazines and then books and then trying to win a Pulitzer Prize, There's one poetry that's written for an audience of strangers where you want to connect with as many people on that deep level as possible. And there's another sort of poetry that's just as justified and just as useful, which is to give somebody, a poem that means something to you personally. And I call those private poems, where they're between two people and you just write a poem and so you can send it to, tell people, tell somebody what why they're important or what, bringing up a memory or something like that. And, we don't do that as often, that former, but it's a very natural thing to do. And there's a difference, though, in that you need to, if it's for public, you need to tell everything so that we can know what's going on, or at least get some sense of what's going on. And if it's private, you don't have to, and you can have inside jokes throughout. And it doesn't matter that you never explain them. And then there's a way that you can kind of, walk both ways. Like, I think Ted Bron. My brain is just Ted, what is his name? Man, it has been so long. I mean, I just read submissions. It's so long since I read. Brodigan? Is that his name? Brodigan? Yeah, Brodigan. Jeez. Anyway, Ted Brodigan. No, not Berrigan. I don't even know who I'm thinking of. One of those poets, in the New York school, was always writing about friends and things. He never knew exactly what was going on. He would reference, I don't know who I'm thinking of, but he would reference, Sally or something. And I have no idea who Sally was. It was kind of like everything was like inside, but you were like getting a peek on the inside at the same time. And there was enough detail where you stayed engaged and like felt like you were like eavesdropping, kind of like spying on these family shenanigans. It's not Ted Berrigan, though. Who am I thinking of? Somebody. Ted Bundy. Richard Brodigan. That's what I'm thinking of. Jeez, thanks, Robert. Yeah, so Richard Brodigan does this all the time, and a whole bunch of people in that New York school. Kenneth Koch and people like that. Just having that really personal reference. But it's sort of like leaves us out. At the same time, it sort of invites us in. There's a weird way that they walk that line between public and private. And this one, I think, does too. Because I think that it's entertaining and engaging enough, interesting enough that we can enjoy it, but it also can work as something, as a gift for somebody. So it's just something to be aware of, I think, as you're writing poems. That if you have to you can use inside jokes and things like that nobody knows, as long as there's enough other stuff around it where we're like intrigued rather than confused. I guess that's the point. Trout fishing in America, yeah. Let's see. Kate Dodger says, interesting distinction, thinking more about it. Maybe poems that are published but written after another poet are kind of like that, a fusion. Yeah, that's a good point, too, because a lot of times those after poems, you need to see the original, and a lot of people don't. And it's almost like an inside conversation that you're getting to overhear, Like we're almost spying on somebody's internal conversation with someone else, which is an interesting thing. I mean, there's a lot of things to play with. A lot of things poetry can be everything. It's all over the place, and there's continuums everywhere. And I think this kind of exists on that continuum because it kind of functions in that way too. But because of the great language, I really like the way that the sounds move through the poem. I think it works for me as a reader too. I just to stay helpful though, I really think exhausted by exertion from passing back and forth so carelessly, I think I would cut this and just go from here to the sheer weight of our love. Like find some kind of connective tissue that's really quick for that. And then we don't get that weird sense that the language is a little romantic where it really doesn't fit. And then clear up the seaweed clumps and the gunslinger duet issue. And just tell this a little bit more clearly without the circling and dodging and things. Those are my only two real suggestions, though. Otherwise, I think it's it tells a story very clearly, and we see it and we kind of feel it. So I think it works as a poem. And then too, get some of these specific details. I'm trying to get that into the poems like the sonnet, because I love the sound of this. It's just not specific enough to be as engaging. I mean, if you look at a poem like this is written better, like on a technical level or something. The sonnet's done really well. But the other poem is more engaging, and it's because of those specific details. So that's just an overall thing or overall point to note. Okay, well, it's time for me to go. Thanks, everybody, for joining me on the Critique of the Week this week. Before I go, let me say that this week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Alexis Sears. Her new book is Out of Order. You saw Alexis just recently when she had the Heartbreak Guzzle. About a month ago in Poets Respond. Great poet. This book is the winner of the Donald Justice Poetry Prize, which is a prize I always like. They always have good books. So when I heard that she won that, I asked her if she'd be on the show. A lot of formal poetry, a lot of different plays of styles in this book. And it's going to be, note the special day, though. It's back to a Sunday, but at the regular time. So the 4th of July, Independence Day in the United States, is Monday at the usual time. So we moved it back a day to Sunday, July 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's Rattlecast number 150. The prompt for this week was Katie Bickham's, which was to write, it's kind of complicated, but to write an abstract emotion as the title, and then use very concrete imagery to enact that emotion, like Stephen Dunn's poem Tenderness. That was the prompt for this week for the open lines. That's going to be Sunday, July 3rd, the regular time, but a different date. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great weekend in the meantime, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.